When did you come to Ramsey, the city of Ramsey?
I was born there.
You were born there? No.
I was born on the Opakish, what are now the Opakish States.
Oh, okay.
Down by the river.
When did your mom and dad come there?
They came here
And
from
then-
Iowa,
Oh, they came from Iowa? Whereabouts from Iowa?
near Waterloo.
Oh, okay. So then he started the farm there, he bought the acreage, or did he buy the
He bought the
acreage all at
acreage.
once, or did he buy some of it?
He was looking for land,
Uh-huh.
and he went on excursions
Okay.
up as far as Canada. But then finally, he bought right there on the banks of the Mississippi. A very lovely location. Have you been down to the Opakish States?
Not for quite a few years.
They're certainly built up.
Oh, yes.
Now, the house burned down, the one I was born in.
Uh-huh. And
I was
then-
born in 1911.
Oh, my mom was born in 1910.
1910.
Mm-hmm.
In 10?
1910. Yeah.
Just say that again.
She was born 1910.
And how is she doing?
She passed away a few years back.
Oh,
Yeah.
I never expected to live to be this old.
Oh, you look wonderful.
Now, were
Sharp.
you were on the historical, society, or belonged to the historical society with the Elk River,
Yeah, Sherburne County.
Sherburne County?
I still do.
Oh, do you?
Because I have friends there. See, I've been in this county now for ever since 1977.
Okay.
A goodly amount of time
Uh-huh.
to get acquainted with people.
Oh, sure.
And now it's not a society that gives trips. It's a society, they're collecting data, artifacts. They're doing the historical thing as much as they can. And now they're trying to build a new building.
What do you remember back when you were on your dad's farm, back in the city of Ramsey? Because we're trying to establish, how it was like back years ago when you grew up.
Well, it was a beautiful farm site, and of course we always had animals.
Mm-hmm.
My father was a fantastic horseman,
Really?
Wow.
and one of the teams of horses that we rode behind were a pair of Hambletonians they have 5 paces. They walked, they trotted, they paced, they galloped, and
Canter.
cantered.
Loped.
And they could make it into town in about 5 minutes.
In
Into
town?
Anoka.
Yeah, town was a long way away back then, wasn't
Yeah,
it?
it was. And of course, I remember it so well. When I started school, of course, there was no pavement. And they had the main Jefferson Highway was a gravel road. But when we went to school, we took the pony cart and drove up the lane, from the farm. And then we hit for the little ditches. There were ditches on each side, so we could pass whomever. And then my brothers would always go in the ditch, and then they'd go over the main road, and then they'd go in the ditch, and they'd go to the main road and go into the ditch. And I laughed all the way.
Were your brothers older or younger than you?
I had 2 brothers older.
Older. So
And I had 3
Sherwin, was
brothers
he
younger.
the old?
No, I have 2 brothers and a sister younger.
Oh, big
They're
family.
half-brothers and a half-sister.
And Sherwin was a full brother?
Oh, yes.
Was he the oldest or the middle?
He was the older.
Firstborn, huh?
Yeah.
He was quite a character, wasn't he? I remember him because, like I said, we
Yeah.
purchased his property from him, so I remember him very distinctly when he lived in the home.
Now, I have to tell you, I don't hear well, so I'm not hearing all you say.
Okay, that's okay.
She bought his property, so she remembers him very well.
Mm-hmm.
I remember him only as a bachelor. I don't remember when his wife lived there. Did Sherman have kids?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, Nancy's one of them.
Nancy
and Elda, 2 girls.
Okay.
Yes, and they grew up on the farm.
No, they must have gone to school. Did they go to the one-room schoolhouse?
Yes,
Remember?
they did.
Did you go there too?
Yes.
Did you?
Yeah.
No, did you?
Now this is a personal thing. That when I got off the farm, my foot off the farm, it was my life. You know, at home I was in a short leash. I had to be a good little girl. And of course I kept getting sick all the time. My mother had to nurse me back to health. But when I started school, we could go to kind of a little kindergarten in the spring for a couple of weeks. And I liked it. And then I got the measles. So I had to stay home for the rest of the year. But I brought my book home. And one word at a time, my mother helped me learn how to read the little book, all about the little red hen. And so then the next fall I went back because I had read the book. I told our teacher, Miss Annie Wilson, that I didn't want to be in first grade. I wanted to be in second. Would you believe it? They put me in second, and my parents allowed it. From then on, I ran my own education entirely. If I flunked, I flunked. That was my business. And then she never taught me any arithmetic for first grade. And that was a sad mistake on my part, not to have been in first grade at all. But I figured out that if she'd have had me in first grade, I'd have been in a class by myself.
Oh.
As it was, I was in with older children.
So there wasn't a lot of kids in school back then, obviously, if you were going to be the only first grader.
Well, there were 30 or 35 usually. It was a big school.
Who was your teacher, or who was the
Miss Anna Wilson.
Okay. Then
And
Miss
she
Smith
mentioned
came
there
there
the
later.
Pipenhagen. Do you remember the Pipenhagens?
I remember, yeah.
There's a Pipenhagen up here in Elk River. He ran a barber shop for a long time. So I always flunked arithmetic. But even though I flunked arithmetic, I did pretty well on my state exams. And I got to be the salutatorian of Anoka County for that 8th grade.
Oh my.
I,
Yes.
Success! That's wonderful. So now, Sherwin, you know where Sherwin Schenk's farm is on Highway 10.
Of course.
And I know where Alpaca Estates is, but your dad and you and Sherwin, everybody was born on the other side of the road. Who had the farm that Sherwin lived in when he passed on, the one that we bought? Who had that farm at that time? Or did Sherwin build that farm?
Well, no, it was a Menzel farm.
Menzel.
M-E-N-Z-E-L.
Okay.
A Menzel farm. And those people were, staunch Germans.
Mm-hmm.
And they were the ones that built the house. And then I liked the old house better.
That's right. I understand that there was 2 houses there and that they did rebuild the house on the same foundation.
Yeah, the same site.
Yes.
And then they wanted to build a barn.
Mm-hmm.
And we were living by the river when the log jams were coming down. And one of my early memories was going over in the little boat with the head of the crew to have dinner on a beautiful Sunday night in the Wanigan, where they did the cooking.
Oh.
The Wanigan has the 3 boats.
Okay.
The one where the horses were, the one that was the place where the men would sleep, and then, of course, there was the one where they did the cooking. And for dinner that night, we had one thing that I've never forgotten, never had it since. That was fried cabbage. I don't know how anything like fried cabbage could have been so good.
It is good. If you throw some noodles in butter, it's even better. It's Polish.
And then
Yes.
I envied my brothers because 2 of the men with the horses that they used on the drive came over and took them to the Wanigan.
Cool.
But at the time we lived on the farm, it was a gravel road all the way to Anoka. And by that time they had put in, by the time I was aware of how the streets were in Anoka, they had put in concrete crosswalks. And then they had it so that you could drive with your team right up in front of a store and get out of your buggy and go into the store. After they began to make the streets in Anoka, they had to lower all the entrances
Oh, is that right?
because they were expecting cars to take over.
Oh.
I think it was Mrs. Pearson that had told us, and she told us memories of taking the Pearson boys down to the amphitheater in the park in Anoka for bands and everything on
Yes.
Saturday night. Did you ever attend any of those functions?
yes.
Did you?
And
There was
it
a
was still
fond
there.
memory for her.
Yeah, it's still there.
The
Mhm.
remedy, the remains of it are
The
still there.
remains are still there, but you know, I was wondering because she had said that they had went there and it was really, really a memorable time.
And for a long time, over in what was Bridge Square,
Mm-hmm.
they had their band concerts once
Right.
a week. And then before that, in Bridge Square, they had a tabernacle that came to town with an evangelist named Aldrich. And that was in 1920.
And he came every week.
Really?
Huh?
Or,
He came every week?
He just was there all the time.
all the time.
Yeah. And when my father came to town, they had two groups of people, those that went to church and those that went to bars.
Yes.
And he told me quite a bit about that because he heard about this after he got to Anoka. And he had no trouble. But what they would do, if they had their way, they would accost a new person who came to town and ask him if he'd set up the drinks in that particular saloon. And if he refused, they would grab him hanging from his ankles over the Camelback Bridge.
Oh no.
We had a bridge that went like this into town. And they would let him hang down until he promised to set up the drinks. Well, our neighbor, Mr. Stein, told, I guess, the sheriff that when Bill Schenk came to town, he was a very able-bodied young man. And so then the sheriff said, okay, guys, mess with him, and I won't defend you.
Wow.
And so Father said, I came to town, I drove into Anoka with my team, I put them up in the livery stable, I did my business, and I drove home, and nobody ever bothered me.
Where was the livery stable?
There were several. You know where Bridge Square is?
Mhm.
That is where one of the big livery stables was.
Okay. Where was the other?
And there was one
By the
over
lumber
near
mill?
the old high school,
Okay.
and one was at near the Jackson Hotel,
That would be Billy's now.
Yeah.
and then there was one that was Swan Johnson's, and that was out a ways. What?
Swine Johnson?
Swan.
Oh, Swan.
Swan Johnson.
Swan Johnson.
Yeah.
It is swine. Oh my gosh.
Do you remember the lumber mill down by the Rum River?
Yes.
The-
I didn't traffic around it much, but I knew that it was a good lumber mill.
It was going at the time when you were growing up, or
Oh, yeah.
was it?
Mhm.
Okay. 'cause
And even some of my students worked there during the days of CCC, before they went into CCC camps. One got his start in earning a living
Mhm.
by working at one of those lumber mills. The CC camps were a wonderful thing. We should have something like that
What
now.
is a CC camp?
And I think one of the people now who's advocating that is this man that does the summary at the end of every 60 Minutes program,
Oh.
What is a CCC camp?
Civilian Conservation Corps.
Oh.
And
Oh,
that
I
was
got
what,
going there.
it was so wonderful during the Depression because so many people were having such a hard time. And the young people didn't have any outlet for their energies at all. So that was one of the things that President Roosevelt got started.
Mhm.
And they were all over the country. And they gave the young men enough money so they had some to send home to their families. And as one of them that I talked to not long ago, he said that was how these kids got food. We were so poor.
So then they would work at the farm then? Or they start a farm up and then?
A lot of them, well, one of the places that I've enjoyed the most has been in the Blue Ridge Mountain Drive in Virginia.
Mhm.
And that is where they built the walls, the retaining walls along the roadside.
Okay.
And some of the people went to northern Minnesota. And I can't remember all the places that they went, but in each state they went to different places. But it got and of course it was great preparation for getting along with people when they got into World War II.
Did your dad ever get involved in the political or go to town meetings at City Hall?
Well, I guess he did.
Ramsey?
He was quite active. Sherwin was quite active, did you know that?
Yeah, I knew he was.
But the girls could tell you more about that.
Uh-huh.
But Father, by the time my mother died of cancer, he just had all he could do was to keep paying his debts.
Mm-hmm.
It got him so in debt. First, they upgraded the farm and the house and bought an old car that was a lemon, a beautiful Oakland that was a lemon. And then, of course, my mother's hospital bills. She died in 1921 when I was 10.
That must have been very difficult for you.
Difficult for the whole family.
Yeah. Leaving children behind is difficult.
Well, there were just the three of us at that time.
Yeah, but
And then my father married again. And that was because my mother felt sorry for this young woman that was teaching school. And incidentally, going back to this tabernacle, I'm going to finish up that first. That was a beautifully built building out of fresh pine wood. Smelled wonderful. And then the floors were all shavings. And I remember that so well because I lost a ring in the shavings and we never found it. The minister had a very good pianist, a very good choir director, and he had a lot of energy to deliver his message. And what he would do would get all steamed up about saving us. And then he would pick up a chair and crash it to the floor, and it would fall apart. And that impressed me a lot. Usually, I don't know if you ever heard of Arch Pease, but he ran a paper in Anoka for a long time. He was a kid then, and he sang in the choir. And he went over there one Sunday and saw that the minister was cutting through the legs of the chair.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my goodness.
And so then he went home and told his dad, and his dad said, "You should have been over there looking." And then people afterwards could go up and, decide that they wanted to become church members. And some, of course, already were. And then they could choose their own church. But my father was one of the people who helped to make it safe for that minister to be in town. Yeah.
Cool.
Wow.
Well, how did your mom and dad end up in Ramsey? And
They wanted a home of their own.
Where did they come from?
Iowa.
Oh, that's right, Iowa.
And they were farming the family farm. And that meant that my father couldn't quite practice his own skills, because some of the family thought they knew more about how he should do it and they weren't good farmers either. They weren't even farmers. So he could have gone to western Iowa and rented land, but that would have been not very close to medical services. And so that would have been hard if my mother had become ill. So then he came up this way and found that farm, which became the vacation spot for every relative in Iowa
Uh-huh.
Is that right?
had time off to come and spend part of the summer with us.
On the river.
On the river.
How many acres did you have?
We only had 97 to begin with, or 87, I think. And then when Sherwin lost, when they built the highway through, they took the Larkin place, which he was on. He'd rented the Larkin place. Well, then he came down and was able to buy into the Menzel property and the Larkin property too.
Larson?
And then all of that was on the riverside my father took.
Larkin, where was Larkin property? Because Larson was right next to Schenk.
Who?
Larson?
No, Larkin.
I thought it was
Larkin.
Larson had the farm right next to Schenk's farm there. Because
You're
my
talking
dad.
about Larson.
Yeah.
This is Larkin.
Where was his farm?
Do you know where the man lives who raises fruit and vegetables?
Mm-hmm.
Well, their place was right there.
Oh.
And the Larkin place, house and barn were right on the highway.
Oh, okay.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then the highway went right through your father's property
Yeah, he lost some of his property.
to
But
the
you
highway?
see, on Sherwin, they lost the whole Larkin house
Mm.
and a big piece of the property. And that
Now, was that Jefferson Highway? Was that Jefferson Highway
yeah,
before?
and then they renamed it number 10.
Okay, okay.
Mhm.
I was just trying to remember that.
Yeah, we used to go to entertainments in the evening. And it got to be after a while that when my father had a car, that there would be, and other people had cars, young people would be sparking in the lanes, in our lane. And Father would sometimes even have to drive out in his own field to get around them. And he thought, what should he do? But we had a little dog named Pinch, and Pinch was irritated when the trains whistled at the crossing. So he'd howl, and howl, and howl. Father got an idea. He named the farm the Howling Hound Farm,
Oh.
and that took care of his problem. Nobody wanted to park where there was this dog. That was a howling hound. That poor little dog chased cars until finally a car got him and ran over him. He went 3 legs after that.
Oh.
Oh my gosh.
So your farm, your dad's farm butted up to Pearson's? Did it butt up to Pearson's farm? Your dad's farm, did it butt up to Al Pearson's farm?
Well, do you remember Hanson's? It was the Hanson farm that was next
Mhm.
to it. I
Yeah.
didn't pay any attention to it after that.
Actually, I
I don't remember
think
that.
Hanson is still.
I don't remember
There
that.
is. There's a Hanson
Different
farm,
ones.
and actually, I think they gave right away or something for a bridge or for some park or something. I know Hugheby's did, but I think Hanson's is right next to Hugheby's. Hugheby's would be next to. Let's see, Hugheby's, Hanson's, and then would be Alpaca Estates,
Okay.
The Howling Hound Farm.
the Howling Farm.
And then on
So-
the other side would be Pearson's then, wouldn't it?
I don't know. I really don't know, but I think so because
Yeah.
That was a pretty highway then,
Yeah.
because there were so many quite nice farmhouses
Mm-hmm.
all the way from Anoka to Elk River.
Now, Sherwin didn't own the farm when it burnt, did he? Or did Larkins own the farm when it burnt? Not Larkin.
He rented the
Menzel.
Larkin farm.
Right. The house that he lived in
Menzel.
when he passed on, Menzel. The Menzels own the house when it burnt the first time, or did Schenk own it when they had to rebuild it?
I can't remember all that succession there,
Okay.
but I can't remember when Menzel's moved away.
Let me see. But Sherwin lived there for quite some time, did he not?
I know there were some Peckhams that lived there for a while before Sherwin did.
I do know that because of the fact that we own the property, we have the abstract, which goes all the way back to the middle 1800s when the United States owned it, and when the train tracks came through and everything, and all mentions that in the abstract as well. And so that must be when Menzels were in there, because we're talking way back in the early 1900s here when she was born. I mean, Schenks were already there in the early 1900s.
Yeah.
Did you ever see that big log?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, that was where the other Menzels lived.
Okay, because they had like a Quonset hut
Yeah,
there.
but before that time, before the big log was there was a little building there, and it had been a church. And then when we wanted to give our Christmas program, we walked against the wind from the schoolhouse north into this church and built a fire. It had a stage, and that's where we put on our Christmas programs. A very nice place. And then after a while, somebody decided that we could use it as a dance hall. That was where I learned to dance, the polka and the waltz and the foxtrot. And then when they put in the highway, of course, they had to move that little old church. And it's still living down there as some kind of a... I don't drive that way enough now to stop and take a look at
It's not a garage or anything, is it?
something like that.
Okay, because I often wondered where that came from.
Yeah.
By Holiday there. It's,
Huh?
it's by Holiday Station on the...
Uh-huh.
Yeah. I often wonder what that building was. We thought it was the school, but it's not the school.
No, it was a little church years ago,
Okay.
before our time.
Did you have any pictures of that?
No,
No pictures?
no.
No.
I know Nancy said that
We
you
were
do.
too poor to take pictures when I
That's-
went to school.
Oh.
That's right. You told me that, and Nancy said that you did have some, maybe would have some pictures of history of Ramsey. Is that possible? She said she's working on something with you in regards to history, and that she'd be doing some.
She's helping me hone my memory.
Uh huh.
I got to be 80, and I decided that my memory was not good. And we have some senility in the family. My father's next older brother and his 6 younger brothers were had senility. And then finally, one of my smartest cousins was supposed to be taking care of her husband when they moved to California. He had emphysema. He died, and the kids went out and found out he'd been taking care of her. She had an advanced case of Alzheimer's. So I decided when my memory wasn't good, and when I turned 80, that there were things I should do. Finally, I lost my sense of humor, and that was when I began to get in touch with people that I had worked with. And that was a very interesting project.
What did you do when you worked?
I taught forever. That was 27 years. That was forever.
What school?
I taught 13 years out in rural schools in Anoka County.
Oh, you did?
Wow.
And this should impress you,
I'm ready.
because I went out to teach when I was 18. I already had my teacher training. And I got my first paycheck. I taught in a school up near Cedar. It was called the Crooked Brook School.
Oh.
Had a very crooked brook near it. And I brought my paycheck down to Anoka to cash. And the stock market had gone to ruin in 1929. And my father said, if you put it in the bank, you'll lose it. And he said, if you give it to me, and he needed money so badly after my mother died, that, I can keep it for you and repay you. But the Farmers' Depression came at the end of the First World War. The First World War didn't end nicely like the Second World War did. It ended, well, I shouldn't use the word nicely. It ended because of the Spanish flu. It was killing soldiers in Europe and in our own troops that went over. They came home in body bags, and somebody would say, well, they died of pneumonia. They never called it the Spanish flu, but a lot of people died of that. And then at the end of the war, the soldiers were given no compensation at the end of the war. And many of them went to Washington to try to petition to get, like the GI Bill of Rights. But that was not anything that President Coolidge could understand. And so he sent out the generals like Eisenhower and MacArthur to get rid of these guys who camped in Washington, to shoot them out. And he got rid of them. Then there was the Farm Bill, because the farming, we didn't have our markets in Germany anymore, because they had to pay compensations. They didn't have money to buy our produce. And so the farmers wanted a farm bill passed, but President Coolidge vetoed it. So then somebody wrote me a little letter one time, and they got into the political thing, and said we should have another president like Coolidge. And I think it was one of these radical right people that was the author of that article. We should have a man that was pure. He wouldn't be like Clinton, which a lot of presidents have been like Clinton. So anyway, I wrote back to this person, and I said, well, President Coolidge had a beautiful wife named Grace, and she was, very savvy about the political scene in Washington. That was one of the things he had going for him. And then I told him about how the war ended for the veterans. The people in Second World War were so lucky to get home alive, or in any shape at all. But they did have the GI Bill of Rights, which is wonderful. And then the Marshall Plan, where we went into Germany and made it possible for those people to live a little afterwards. But the Germans haven't always been happy about us romping around in Germany. I talked to a man up here in Elk River a few weeks ago, and he had been sent to Korea. Of course, that was in the 1950s. And he was there, but he was still in service, so they sent him to Germany to do an engineering job, build bridges across the little rivers and all that. He said the Germans didn't like their being there. But I suppose there are always two sides to everything, aren't there?
Yep. What grade did you teach when you were teaching? What grade?
Well, those 13 years, I taught all 8 grades.
All 8 grades? Oh, goodness.
And then at the end of the 8 years, see, I always wanted to get to college. After 2 years, I resigned my first school so that I could go to college. I wanted to teach in high school. I didn't want to teach in grade school. And yet, when I was in high school, one day they gave us a chance to come down and sign up for teacher training. That was the best thing I ever did. I trotted down and signed up. I didn't want to teach in a country school, but I signed up. And that meant there was something that I could do. That would be the next thing to going to college, or would it? But at the end of 13 years, I found out they were going to play games with me. And I think somebody thought they could get me cheap, because that was when there was a shortage of teachers. But there was one school where a teacher who had been very popular was in trouble, and I think they thought that if I would take the upper grades, that would help her hold her job. So anyway, they didn't give me what I wanted, and then I was able to go to college long enough to teach in a city school.
So when you taught in Anoka County, where did you live then? You lived on your dad's farm?
I boarded
Oh, you
during the week. And then my father would take me to school on Monday morning, and my stepmother would come and get me on Friday afternoon.
Okay.
Bless their hearts, that was hard for them too. But they never, ever complained, because I was the family backup. We'd have never had a Christmas for a number of years if it hadn't been for that paycheck. And I bought a lot of chicken feed, a lot of oil meal for the cows to eat, and so on. It meant, and finally I used enough of the money after I taught a number of years, so I bought a radio, and that was when you got the big battery with it. So I bought this huge battery. It was in the living room, and then there was the radio. So my half-brother, my half-sister could listen to the radio. And there were a few other things I was able to do.
That's wonderful.
But we were very, very short on money. Because, you see, after the Farmers' Depression, then there was the Great Depression, when the stock market crashed. And then there was the drought, which was terrible in most parts of the country. We were lucky. Except, in one incident we were particularly lucky. And then, of course, after that, the drought, it began to rain after a while, and then World War II. But why we were lucky, one time, because of the drought, I had herded cows in a pasture that wasn't fenced. And I herded the cows. I had a saddle horse that I loved to ride. And it meant that the cows could eat right up to the roadside. They could get every little snip of grass possible. We were that short of grass in the pastures. Then, of course, I had to get them back across the tracks and down by the river before the afternoon train whistled, because that would scare my horse. And she'd stand up on her hind legs, and I'd have to let the reins hang while I grabbed the saddle horn. I'd give her a little kick, and then she'd run. She'd gallop furiously to get away from that train. And then after a while, I'd turn the horse around and we'd take the cows home. Well, I did that for a couple of years, and then the third year, my young brother, who was about 11, was asked to ride the horse and herd the cows.
Mhm.
And I didn't realize how competitive he was before that. But that time he was really competitive. When he didn't get the cows across before the train came, the horse reared and he decided not to pull leather. He didn't reach for the saddle horn and grab it. He pulled it on the reins. I wonder what he thought those were made out of. You know. And he pulled the horse so hard she fell right over on him.
Mm-hmm.
But there was a whole pile of dust there from a dust storm, and that was what kept him from being hurt terribly.
Mhm.
Of course, as soon as he fell in the dust, the horse scrambled to her feet. And then the folks, they fenced in the pasture after that.
Yeah. So you used to drive him from your across highway, what is it, dirt highway across the railroad tracks to graze them?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
That wasn't a double highway.
No, I
when
know,
did that.
but even going across the tracks, so that's just
The
amazing.
tracks haven't moved.
No, the
No,
tracks
no.
have been there all the time.
They've been there since the moment they were laid. I mean,
Yeah.
they've been repaired, but we do know a lot about the tracks, trust
The
me.
most fun about those tracks is that the mayflowers grew along the tracks. The crocuses.
Yes, they do. Huh? Do they still grow there, I wonder?
No,
Mm-mm.
they got a lot of gravel alongside of it now.
And of course there were no school buses. So a lot of us that lived out in the country had to walk into high school.
Oh my gosh.
And some of them walked to
Was
6
your
or
high
7 miles.
Was your high school then right
In Oka.
downtown Anoka?
Mine was just 5 miles. And my brother drove the first year. And the second year I just struck out and walked and caught rides. I caught with rides with every kind of a vehicle there was. There was no Greyhound bus then.
No.
And then the next year, my father and a neighbor drove. Father took us to school, and the neighbor brought us home. And then when I was a senior, I walked in. When they started the teacher training department, that happened to be just the year the Greyhound bus started to run. To Minneapolis in the morning, to St. Cloud in the afternoon.
What year was that?
That was in 1928.
Oh.
So I had transportation into Anoka. Then I had to walk the rest of the way. When I got in town over to the teacher training department, I guess I was a faster walker then.
Did this bus stop over on Ferry Street?
Yeah.
Right on the corner of Ferry and Main there? And then that's where you were dropped off?
Mm-hmm.
Now there used to be restaurants on both sides of the street.
That's right.
And from what I remember, that there was bus stops on both sides of the streets.
Well, if they were going into Minneapolis, they'd stop on the right side.
That was the yellow one, the Yellow Cafe. When I grew up, it was Yellow Cafe, or not the name of it, but it was yellow. It was a little cafe that you went into.
Yeah.
I don't remember the name of it.
I was more familiar with the Bite Cafe on the other side of the street.
With that big building.
Well, it was where we caught the bus when we came home.
Okay.
When the bus came from Minneapolis, it stopped on that side of the street.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, there was a cafe there, and then was there a grocery store across the street when you were young?
It was down farther, down, you know where the hospital was, right on Ferry Street there? Remember
Mhm.
the hospital?
Mm-hmm.
There was a grocery store just south of there, about a block, that I remember when I was a kid.
That was Payette's.
Payette's grocery store?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's so much that moved around so much and changed so much.
Right, well, back in those days, Anoka and Ramsey were one, really, basically, were they
Mhm.
not? I mean, and Ramsey kind of like made themselves the next off of Anoka or whatever, however that happened years
My
ago.
father could look ahead in time, and he said that soon everything would grow up so much, everything would be built up so much, that Minneapolis would be right out to where we were.
That's right.
And of course he was right. Well, going back to the Greyhound bus then, I rode the Greyhound bus in the mornings, and That was wonderful. And then I would ride it home in the afternoon. And 25 years later, my favorite bus driver was on a run towards St. Cloud, and he stopped to give me a ride. I don't know how he knew me. I was dressed in clothes that fit and were okay. You know, I had a fur coat by that time, 25 years later. But he started talking to me, and he said, I remember you well. He said, you used to ride the bus out this far. You'd get off the bus, you'd go look in the mailbox, and then you'd run for home. But he said if there was a bad storm and the lane was blocked with snow, your father would come on a workhorse leading your riding horse.
Oh.
And then he said you'd get on the riding horse and you'd ride for home, and the horse would leap one snowbank after another after another. And he said I would just let the bus sit so that people could watch you ride until you were out of sight. Of course,
Aww.
riding happened to be the only passion I ever had in life anyway. You know.
You like to ride horses?
Well, I had to ride horseback. My brothers could.
Yeah.
Yeah. The first time I learned how to post finally, where I didn't bounce too hard in the saddle, I was 11. And my older brother and I were home alone, and we needed kerosene for the oil stove, and we needed sugar to cook whatever we wanted to cook. And we got up to Gort Blazes. Did you ever hear of Gort Blazes?
Mm-mm.
Do you know where the that brick house is? Near the way station?
Yes.
Yeah. You see, right near there was where the old railroad, where you get,
Get onto the railroad tracks. The depot?
that was the depot.
Really?
Yeah. And my stepmother taught a short distance down on Highway 10, a very short walk up there to catch the train when she wanted to go back to St. Paul to her home. Well, Gort Blaze then moved his, after they put in the highway, new part of the highway, he had to move, see? So he moved up a little beyond the brick house. Well, that was where we had to go. But to the old Gort Blazes, not to the new one. And I had to carry the sugar. And very shortly it was going to spring a leak, and I was going to lose my sugar. So my brother rode up behind me, and he said, Pearl, every time your horse puts its left foot forward, stand up in your stirrups. That was the best riding lesson I ever had. I lost no more sugar. I never bounced in a saddle again. I could trot a horse forever. I learned how to post. It was a wonderful day when we got a washing machine where we could pull the lever and keep pulling it.
Was it a wooden one?
To get the water
Was
and
it
the
a wooden
clothes
wash
circulating.
machine? Was it a wooden wash machine?
Yes.
Yes, I have one at home. You go like this
Yeah.
to agitate it?
Mm-hmm.
Was it when you were naughty that your mother disciplined you that way?
No.
I guess Darlene's got some memories
My
here.
mother really didn't discipline me much. She'd
Yeah.
say, Pearlie, and that was it.
Pearlie.
Called me
No
Pearlie.
thanks. That's a beautiful name. Were you named for someone? No?
I think when Father went on one of these land excursions up into Canada, he rode in the train with an actress who was named Pearl Wilson, and I got the name.
Cool.
And then the middle name was Marie. But I think my mother for a time thought it was after my grandmother, Marea. So I don't know for sure which it was. But on my birth certificate it's spelled M-E-R-I-E. So that was when I travel, I have to use Pearl, M-E-R-I-E.
Marie.
How was your house heated? How was the house heated?
It was heated by, in the sitting room. We had a beautiful, big stove that had all four sides isinglass.
Oh,
When,
those old potbelly stoves?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that was heated with coal.
Okay.
And then it had fenders around. And if you came home with your feet, and your feet were cold, you could put them up in this fender around the stove. Then finally we got another stove that we could burn wood in, or coal. And that was the one that my brother used to come down, and if it wasn't too hot, he sat right on the stove to get warm. One of my fond memories of my brother Sherwin is of his sitting on the stove to get warm. We had a couple other stoves too.
Did you have a hand pump then in the kitchen to get
We
water?
had a cistern pump because we had a cistern, and we had the cook stove that had the part at the end where you could take the water, the tank for the water to heat, and that was nice.
Now, if there was a fire in Ramsey, who did take care of that? What happens if there was a fire in Ramsey where you lived?
The house burned down.
The house burned down.
Took care of that.
Nobody came and helped.
There was a place that was right opposite our place. Our place was down by the river, and then you came up and went across the tracks. Then you had to go up that crossroad. But this house was right opposite our place. And somebody who bought that property, it was the old Johnson property, they had evidently painted and had some rags that they didn't contain. It burned down the whole house. That happened a lot. The houses burned down.
Well, you had a fire at your house, did you not?
My grandmother put the rags in. There was a laundry house side of the farmhouse, and she had rags from turpentine and stuff, and that caught the house on fire. The whole side of the house, but it didn't burn our house down. I don't know what happened, but people from the road would come and take the furniture and stuff out of the house, is what my mother told me, and she lost her watch. Somebody took her watch because it was on the dresser.
Oh.
But the whole house didn't burn down. It was just one side of the farmhouse that burnt.
Was there somebody came and helped put it out?
I don't know how it went, what the story was, how it went out. I'll have to ask my cousins.
Did she tell you about the big tornado that came through?
Tell us about it.
That was back in the, wasn't it the 40s? Late 40s?
I thought it was the late 30s. Maybe. I knew it was the late 30s.
Was it the late 30s? Okay.
Let me see. It was in, Nancy was 2 years old, and she was born in 1936.
You said 36.
It was about 1938.
Okay, then my parents weren't here. They were here in 1941.
And my sister-in-law, Pearl, you never knew her.
That would be Sherwin's wife.
That was Pearl's wife, sister-in-law. She had a group that she did things with, and we went on a picnic down below St. Paul. And as we left the Anoka area, my brother looked back and he said, well, somebody's really catching it. And we got down, and it was a stifling hot day. It was just miserably hot. And you could hardly enjoy a picnic, and we couldn't even go outside because it was too hot outside, so we ate inside. And finally, after it got later in the day, we started for home. We got up to Champlin area on the other side of Osseo first, and there were cars along the highways, whichever way. They were just like strings of jewels because the tornado had come and gone across the Mississippi River. And they always said that a tornado would not cross a river. It sure did. And they said that you could see the bottom of the river, the logs and everything. And it went through Anoka and they took the armory. It was really
It was
devastating.
I think they have that in the historical.
And the very first thing that happened was people started stealing.
Yeah, looting.
They looted.
Why do they do that?
So they had to go up to Camp Ripley and get the soldiers to come down and protect the property in Anoka.
Oh, goodness.
And of course it blew away the armory. And that was such an important part of the lives of the kids at school because that was where the basketball games always were.
Oh, is that right?
And that was where the graduations were held.
Oh.
And that was where we had a kind of a crazy show that we wanted to do to earn money in school. That was where we had it, over at the armory. There was one man, of course things happened during a tornado that are funny. Here was a man taking a bath and took the house, and there he was in the bathtub. There were, and it took, over on the other side of the river, it took a couple of cars and blew them right up in the air.
Oh, goodness.
I don't think there were more than 5 or 6 people killed that time. So we had that one. And then in 1941, we had another one that swept through Ramsey.
Yeah. That'd be the one my parents would probably remember.
Yeah. And that was the one that started with a Harry Warnicke's farm. And it took the barn and just moved it enough on its foundation. They could never get the barn put back.
Is that right?
And it went then, it missed the house, and it went right up it took a whole row of trees out, went up across country and took another Warnicke's place out. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it left a turkey hen sitting on top of a straw pile.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, it took the roof of the barn and turned it over and slid half of it on one side of a tree and one half on the other side. Then it went up across country, and there was a woman rocking her baby. It took the house and left her rocking her baby.
Oh, my goodness.
We got in the car shortly after that.
Uh-huh.
I remember that one well because my youngest brother, who's now 60, was a baby
Oh.
at that time. And I was home from school, and somebody called me, and I knew by the way they called, I couldn't stay where I was. I had to come downstairs. My mother handed the baby to me so that she could go down the steps and go up the outside stairway and see what was happening. We had a hired man and his son. They didn't know what to do. They ran toward the river. Then they ran up through the alfalfa field. Then they ran toward the river. And then they ran up through the alfalfa field while my folks stood and watched the tornado go away.
No, that was scary. You didn't go into the cellar then? Did you have a cellar? On
We
the
had a
outside?
cellar, and our cellar was wonderful. It was not too big, but it was a very good cellar. It had huge boulders along the side. And that was where, when my father wanted to save seed potatoes for the next year, he would put them down in that cellar. And then we used an oil stove to heat the cellar part of the time.
Well, it looks to me like we're running out of tape because it's blinking at us, so we can stop our taping.
Okay.
Unless there's some, I mean, we probably have about 5 minutes left. We can let it go until it just runs out, I imagine. But just so that we know we're not getting into anything too deep because it'll be interrupted.
Yeah.
I don't
Well,
know
you're
how
our
much-
interesting lady. You're interesting.
Well, thank you for mentioning that.
I know Mrs. Hughesby sat there, and then she took us for a walk, didn't she? This was in the fall, and she took us for a walk around the river and showed us. What do you know anything about the still that was on the island out there? We've heard 2 people tell us
We
little
knew
bit
it was
different.
there.
Yeah, a little bit different stories about what happened at the still, and if it was really a still or if it was just a place to
Wasn't
camp.
there an airplane guy that got killed there too?
I think that Hughesby was saying that there was.
There was a guy who flew the airplane or whatever, and he was killed there. Remember that?
Stills were here and there.
Kind of stills were here and there.
One man, whose son and his grandkids, I know and like very much, he got into the business. And he got caught. And then they put him in the jail up here in Sherburne County.
Oh.
And then he asked for his Bible. People laughed about that a lot.
Do you remember Pullman's?
Who?
Pullman Farm, the Pullman Farm? That was on Ramsey.
Poland.
Poland.
Yeah, there was a Poland up on the crossroads.
Didn't they have a still up there? No?
I wasn't into keeping track of that.
She didn't frequent them often.
Well, after I left the country, I taught in Red Wing. Then I went to St. Cloud. And then after that, I went down, I went to St. Paul Park for 6 months. And then I went to Red Wing. for 4 years.
Mhm.
And then I was going to get my master's degree out in Colorado, but I didn't like the school that well. I had a couple of fine teachers, but they were going to run my life. I don't like to have my life run much. And so I came back and went to the university instead.
Oh.
And then
When did you graduate?
I went out to teach in Wilmer for 6 years.
Oh.
And then from there, I went to Roseville schools
Hmm.
because I had taken enough work so I could qualify as a counselor and to teach special needs students. So I started the class for the educationally handicapped in the high school.
What year did you quit then?
Teaching?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I quit the teaching part of it in 1956.
And then when
And
did
then
you
I was a
retire?
full-time school psychologist.
Oh, and then when did you?
And I worked with kids that needed special attention. And then in 1970, we realized that there were some wonderful parents who were not doing the right things with their kids. And so we started a program for infants, the parents of infants, toddlers, and preschoolers. Because we were just getting overwhelmed with the number of kids that we had to work with. And some of them, it was merely to tell people what kind of a ball to buy, that they shouldn't be throwing a baseball at a 5-year-old,
Oh. Mm.
and that they could come in school, use the school library to get books for their children to read, and that we shouldn't get too fussy about the artwork, let the kid express himself in drawings. And the nurse could tell them a lot about the fact that maybe you should learn to take your child to a pediatrician.